The Ripon Police Department. This presentation is going to be security and emergency care in the church. Officer Bonak comes to us with 5 years of experience, and we are just so thankful for the Ripon Police Department and everything you do for us.
Well, thank you very much. All right, welcome everybody. Like she said, my name is Corey Bonak, and I've been with Ripon for about 5 years now, and I am the active threat liaison for the police department. So essentially what that means is I kind of have a two-part job in doing that. It's being responsible for training the police department officers, meeting with other groups and organizations, and explaining to them different ways that they can better protect themselves in case of an active shooter event situation. So I apologize if at times it looks like if there's stuff going on the radio, I might have to pause for a second and listen to it. And if something serious happens, I may actually have to end up running out and leaving. So I'll leave you with that, I guess. So let's hope not. It's a Sunday morning. Everything's been good so far, so we'll just hope that everything keeps going that way. All right, Kelly? Okay, so when we talk about this training in general, we talk about who actually needs to have this kind of training. Well, I think if you watch the news at all, it's pretty easy to realize that everybody nowadays needs to understand active shooter response and how they can better prepare themselves to respond in one of those incidents. I usually open with who in here has been through any type of active shooter like training or course, anything like that? Talk at work even. Okay, perfect. So it's actually more than most groups that I talk to. A lot of the times when I ask people if they've ever done that, it's been zero. And what we're seeing is that kids actually understand this stuff because they're being taught it in school right away at elementary level. But when you get to the adults, nobody has ever had this explained to them. I know that when I graduated high school, and that was in 2007, this was something we'd never even talked about. So this is something I learned as a police officer, and I kind of understand how important it is to teach, And I know we're here talking in a church setting about this stuff, but I want you to keep in mind your daily life, like where you go out in public, where this could happen and how this could apply to that situation. So think about running to Webster's in the morning or running to Walmart to go grab groceries. Sitting at work, if you work in an office building, if you work at a factory, you're going to see as we look at some of the statistics that it's actually much more likely to happen in a workplace environment than it is in a school or in a church. So just think about this in all different aspects of your life as we kind of go forward with what we're doing. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm the active shooter or active threat liaison for the police department, and the program that I've been trained in is actually called ALERT. And what that was, it was a program created in 2002 through Texas State University in conjunction with the FBI, and the program was essentially created to get everybody on the same page when it comes to active shooter response, whether that be from the police or from citizens themselves. So the whole goal of this program is to look at what has happened in the last years and continue to evolve the program into what's working best for what's happening right now. And probably the big 3 words that you'll take away from this, you'll see up on the screen there, it's run, hide, fight. So those are just the 3 simple terms that we'll talk about and we'll go over, and this is what the kids are being taught in school, so I go out and I teach the exact same thing to the adults. Another set of verbiage that's used in different programs is avoid, deny, defend. Essentially it means the same thing. So run, hide, fight, it's simple, it's easy to remember, it's just the 3 kind of steps that we'll go through as we talk about this. All right, so what are we going to go over today? This is roughly usually a 30-minute conversation that I have. We want it to be open, so if you guys have questions, feel free to just raise your hand, start talking, whatever it is. This isn't any kind of formal, this is what you will do type training. This is just a, hey, let's bounce ideas off each other, see what works, and kind of figure out what's going to work best for your situation. We'll talk about what an active threat or active shooter is, a brief history of a few different events and how things are changing, and then we'll talk about who active shooters typically are, how to prepare, and how to respond to these incidents. A little bit about the Ripon Police Department, if you don't know. We have 14 total officers, 24-hour coverage. There's always a minimum of 2 officers working. Like I said, I'm one of the 2 that's working right now because it's a weekend. There's not many officers On weekdays, during the daytime, it could be more like 5 or 6 officers that are working, but most of the time it's 2 to 3 in that range. There's a 24-hour dispatch center. We go through Fond du Lac now, so that used to be held here in Ripon. They would answer the phone and dispatch the police officers out, but that actually got shipped over to Fond du Lac. It kind of consolidates everything. It makes it easier, and it has saved the city quite a bit of money by switching to that. We also have a school resource officer, Lindsay Michaels. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with her. She does an awesome job at the schools. Everybody loves her there. And right now, the school is actually trying to get a second resource officer in. So that's very big for them to ask for that. She has a very busy job, and they actually want a second officer in the school. So we're working on doing that, and it could be the start of next school year that there's actually a second resource officer working. And then we have the ambulance and the fire service. Those are always 24 hours staffed as well, also dispatched through Fond du Lac County. So if you call 911 for an ambulance for the fire department, that all goes through Fond du Lac County, and then they get a hold of us, and then we head out. Next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about an active attacker, the actual definition is a person actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined or populated area. It's kind of a broad definition. Essentially, all it means is somebody who is going out and trying to hurt multiple people. Doesn't matter where it is, if it's in a building, in a workplace, out in the open, just means that there's somebody out there who's trying to hurt multiple people. When we look at who these people typically are or what caused them to do the event, it's often people who feel like they've been betrayed or wronged. So it's somebody who's maybe fired from their job, somebody who just went through a divorce and is going through some emotional problems, somebody who's been bullied in schools, that type of situation. It's usually not somebody who's had just nothing go wrong in their life. And then when we look at the events, it's usually one specific target, but then the shooter or the attacker tends to take out whoever is in their way. So if there was only one target, there could end up being 10 people who get hurt because they were in the way, essentially. And that's usually how it works out, unfortunately. And what we're starting to see now is that these people end up being more armed than police are. We're seeing people that start to wear like body armor just like we wear. We're seeing people who carry like military grade guns, all that kind of stuff. So it just goes to show that these people are stepping up their game. So us as police, we need to train better and we need to be more prepared. And then you guys as citizens also need to be more prepared to help yourself if something like this happens. A couple of quick statistics. If we look at 2021, it's kind of an odd year because it was a COVID year, so schools were kind of closed for a majority of it. But you can see right there, 60 of the 61 active shooters were males. And then the age range is typically from about 20 to 30, 35 in that set of numbers right there. So it's very rarely a female doing it. And then this may be hard to read, but essentially what is comparing is 2020 versus 2021 statistics. And what's scary is every single statistic goes up in 2021, and that's the same for 2022 now. Things keep getting worse and worse as this goes on. So you can see it went from 40 up to 60 different shootings. The only number where it actually went down was the number of cops who got wounded in these events. And then I talked about it before, but the importance of thinking about this in everyday life, 32 of those times, it was in a place of business or a place of commerce. So that means everywhere from your office building, your factory, you out at a shop, whatever it is, but that's where this is actually most likely going to happen. And then after that, education is only 2. So we always think of these as going to be like, these are going to be a school shooting. That's what we think about when we see this on the news. It's actually pretty rare that it happens in schools. Those are just the ones that are publicized the most. And then open spaces is 19. That means everything from a city street, a sidewalk, to a park, to a concert. And then house of worship, you see only 1 on there. So it's actually a relatively safe place compared to the rest of these. All right, so we'll talk about where did this all kind of start. And I think most of us remember Columbine in 1999. And what was big about Columbine was this was the first active shooter event that was actually it was on the news all day. And I think most people remember seeing this at some point where they had helicopters flying overhead, and you could see the video of like kids running out of the school, and this went on over the course of hours and hours and hours. So essentially what happened was 2 students, they pretty much terrorized the school for a couple hours, and the police didn't go in the building at all. So the training, like the way that police were trained at the time, was to essentially wait outside until a SWAT team arrives. So I want to ask you guys, how long do you think it would take to get a SWAT team here in Ripon? Okay. It's more like 1 to maybe 2 hours to get a SWAT team here. So those SWAT team people, no, that's fine. I want all the questions. Those SWAT team people, a majority of them are in the Fond du Lac area. They're either work for like the Fond du Lac Police or the Sheriff's Office, and a lot of them are actually at home. They get a phone call that says, hey, you're needed in Ripon at Our Saviour's church right now. They have to get in their car, they have to drive to the police department, they have to get their stuff, their vehicle, and then drive all the way over here. You're looking at least an hour probably before a SWAT team arrives. So it just kind of goes to show how important it is that everybody is as well trained as they can to react, because it's going to be an hour. So the local police need to know how to respond to these, and the citizens as well. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that my son happened to be in high school at the time that that
Oh.
happened.
Yeah.
And I remember him coming home, and as a parent, it scared me because his comment to me was, Mom, I don't know where I would go or what I would do. When you guys teach the kids at the school, do they ever do drills on how to get out of the building?
Yeah, so at that time, active shooter stuff was pretty minimal, and the police didn't train a lot on it. The students definitely didn't train on it at the time, and this was where everything kind of changed. So after this point, once people saw how big of a problem this was, the police realized, hey, we need to change the way we respond to this. You know, it has gone from the police sitting outside a building waiting for SWAT to show up to the first and second officers who are there. They have to go in on their own, and that's it for cops. For the students, they've adopted this entire program, and they're being taught it from elementary school, and they practice the lockdown drills, they practice, you know, where to run outside, all of this. So this is all pretty widely used now, this whole program. Looking at more current events, this one was just last year. This was the supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York. And essentially what happened, it was just a regular Saturday afternoon, 2:30, at the Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo, which was a predominantly black neighborhood. And what happened was the shooter essentially drove into a parking lot, ready to go with his rifle in his hand, and just started shooting people. And it all happened very, very quick. So what he did too is he actually had his phone attached to him, and he was like live streaming the entire event. So everybody on the internet could see this happening. It was just a horrible, horrible thing that happened. But it kind of goes to show how these have evolved in the last 20-some years now. Now we've gotten to this point where there's people strapping cameras to them while they do this so that everybody can see it, so they get their name out there. It's kind of bizarre. How this happened, you can see right there, he pulls his car in, and essentially he started shooting right off the bat. He goes into the store, shoots a couple people in there, and it was like within 8 minutes the police were there and had him already escorted out and under arrest. But again, it just goes to show how quick these go on, and you know how important it is for you to be able to react quickly when something like this happens. What do we know about this guy? He was a teenager. He recently graduated high school. He actually lived 200 miles away from the supermarket. He had no connection to the supermarket, the city. He had no real reason to be there. He was all over the internet. He was exclaiming that he was a white supremacist, that every other race is bad, all this stuff. So he was on the radar of people, but what can police do? So one time in his life, he was actually held in a mental health facility because he had homicidal and suicidal thoughts, but he was released a day later because he said, that was a joke, I feel fine, I don't want to hurt people. And it's sad, but a lot of times that's all people have to say to get themselves out of those mental health facilities. He even conducted his own surveillance. When they watch videos of this, days earlier, he was sitting in the parking lot watching how people went into the store. It's terrifying, the amount of homework that people do before something like this. And then the last one we'll talk about, It's the Jason Aldean concert in Las Vegas. I'm sure we all remember this too. This happened in 2017. The shooter arrived about a week earlier than it happened, so he had his room for a week. And what he did, he started conducting like his own surveillance out of his window, figuring out where all these people are going to be. He picked a room that was right over a concert that was going to be happening. Over the course of that week, he had the hotel staff even carry bags in for him. And those bags, they didn't know it at the time, and I'm sure these people feel awful now, contained all kinds of guns, weapons, ammunition, everything like that. So once it happened, or once it started, he actually screwed his hotel door shut. And those are like thick, heavy, strong doors, so he bolted it shut, and he started shooting. The problem was, in Las Vegas, there's so many high-rises that everything echoes, and people thought that they couldn't tell where the shooting was coming from, so people were basically just looking up in the sky, and there was thousands of people down at this concert. If you go to the next slide, you can see he shot for about 10 minutes before people actually figured out where he was and what was going on. He shot over 850 people, and he ended up killing 58 of them. When the FBI started looking into this guy and why he did it, they found nothing. The guy left no reason for wanting to do this, and that's probably the most troubling thing about this was he had no, there was no signs that this was ever going to happen. So I hate to leave you with all of this stuff. This isn't the goal of this program, but it's to show you how important it is that we start to look at what's going on right now and how we can protect ourselves. All right, very important statistics that we'll talk about before we get into what we're actually going to do. And 98% of the time, there is just one shooter in an active shooter event. The other 2% of the time, when there's been 2 or more, they have always stayed together. So think about that when we talk about how you would actually respond from your office building, or if you're in church, whatever it is. Think about if there's if there's gunfire happening somewhere in a building, 98% of the time, it's just one person. So the odds say that you're safe to go the other direction instead of just hunkering down where you're at. So remember those statistics, it's very important. The average incident is done in just 2 minutes. So police response time, even in Ripon, it's gonna be 3 or 4 minutes before we get to wherever it is. If I need to get to Webster's right now, it'll take me 4 minutes probably to get out to my car and drive all the way there. So if these incidents are done in just 2 minutes, that goes to show how important it is that you guys know how to react quickly and think on your feet and get yourself out of that situation. So the first thing that we can do to try to better ourselves if something like this is happening is actually realizing that something is wrong. So I think we've all probably had an instance somewhere, if it's at work or out in public, where we see something going on and we just feel that like something is wrong. Like the hair on the back of our neck is standing up and we think, ooh, something in my gut is telling me something is wrong right now. I need to probably get myself or my family out of this situation, or at least just start paying attention to what's happening. And the biggest goal that we want for you guys is to realize that something like this is happening, that you guys might be in danger, and you need to protect yourself and get yourself out of that situation as quickly as possible. Instead of just standing there and watching like, oh, I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going to kind of hang out in the background, maybe grab my phone so I can take a video of it. Unfortunately, that's what people do nowadays instead of helping, is usually taking a video of it. So we're just trying to get people to respond quicker once they start to realize that something is wrong. So you guys know your church, your congregation members for the most part. I'm sure you guys would realize like, hey, if there's somebody here that looks off, there's just something, if there's somebody carrying a backpack in church, that's not something you see very often. You see somebody carrying like a big bag, something that just seems off, that's the time when you guys need to see that and be like, okay, this guy doesn't go here, he's carrying a strange bag, whatever it is. This is the time that somebody needs to react and do something with it, instead of just saying, oh, that's probably fine, he's just sitting in the back, he shouldn't cause an issue. But we just want people to act. If it's a false alarm, so be it. That happens all the time. We get called probably five times a day for stuff that is just, it's nothing. I had a call last week, somebody left a backpack in the middle of the street on like Ransom Street, and it gets reported as a suspicious item. It was just an empty backpack from the college. That was it. That's fine. We'd much rather deal with that than letting that go, and then it turns out to be something dangerous. So just act. If something tells you, like, something is wrong, I need to act, I need to do something as quick as possible. All right, so how do we react if there is something going on in the building that you're at? If you're at work, if you're here, if you're at the grocery store, whatever it is. I said it before, the run, hide, fight. The first option that we always tell people to do is run. Get yourself out of that situation as quickly as possible. You know, we say run, that's just saying separate yourself from the situation, get out of the building, get across the street, go down the street, go a couple blocks. Why leave yourself in that situation? If you see somebody who's starting to raise their voice or cause problems at the grocery store, why would you want to stand right next to it and watch what's going on? Remove yourself from it. Just get away. If that means just going to the exit and hanging out until people get it figured out, that's good. Get yourself out of the situation. That's always your best bet, is to avoid it at all costs. We always tell people, just forget about the stuff you brought. If you have a shopping cart and you're at Walmart, just leave it sit. It'll probably still be there when you go back in the store. If you have your purse and your phone and all that stuff and you're worried about going back to collect it, just leave it. Get out of the building as quick as possible. Get your kids, get your family, get out of there. That's the most important thing. Then once you feel like it's safe, call 911. You know, that's important, because the longer you wait to call 911, the longer it takes us to actually get that person to stop. If they're hurting people, you know, that's that much longer that they could be potentially hurting others as well. So remember secondary exits too. So, you know, 9 times out of 10 when we tell people, if we do like a drill or something and we tell people to exit a room, they go through the exact same way that they came in. So most of you, I would assume, go through the back doors to get in and out of here. Most people, it's just ingrained in their head, I'm just gonna go the same way that I came in here. Well, think about all the different ways that you could get out of this room right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different doors here that you could get out of. There's other places back here that you can hide. We just want people to think about secondary exits. That's not just doors too. So that's, you know, if you have a ladder that goes up to a second floor, if you have a fire escape, if you have a window, you know, it's everything in us tells us to never break a window. But if something serious is happening, get yourself out of that window. There's chairs everywhere, there's tables. If you need to break a window, go ahead and break a window. It's fine. I don't know that I would break a nice stained glass window in here, but those are hard to replace. But you got to do what you have to do. Look at like Quick Trip. If you're in a Quick Trip, there's always a secondary fire door that you're not allowed to use. There's big red things on there that say stop, fire exit, don't use, you know, all that stuff. That's the time when you use it. That's what they're for. Use those secondary doors and get yourself out of there as quickly as possible. Next slide. So I'd mentioned calling 911. As soon as you feel safe to do that, 911 is going to want to know just a few simple things: where you are, the name of the place, what's happening. There's a person inside the church, he's got a gun. I'm at Walmart, there's a person with a knife. Whatever it is, they're going to want to know, is anybody injured, how many people are injured, and what that person is actually wearing. If you're the first person who called, they might keep you on the phone for a little while because you're the best source of information until the police get there. You know, if you call 911, you're the only person who knows what's going on until the police arrive. So they're probably going to want to keep you on the phone as long as possible because you're giving the most updated information. All right, the next step. So we said run, hide, fight. We went through run. Next step, hide. The best thing you can do, if you don't feel safe exiting where you are, if you're not sure what's going on in the rest of the building, and you have a place to hide, get yourself locked in a room. As soon as you can, shut the door, lock it, and turn out the lights. This is practiced in the schools, and the kids are very good at it. They do lockdown drills all the time. They're out there, they're moving chairs and stuff in front of the door. Essentially, all you want to do is give the impression that that room is empty. So, with hiding in your room, what's been kind of looked at in the statistics is when an active shooter or someone goes to a door and they see that it's locked, they typically just move on to the next door. They don't try to push their way in or knock the door down or anything crazy like that. They usually just move on to the next room. So if you can get that door locked, closed, like I said, give the impression that nobody's in there, be quiet, turn your cell phones off, just hang out in the back of the room and just wait it out. Because you didn't feel safe to leave, so your next best thing is to just hide in that room and don't let that person come through the door. If you have all these chairs sitting over here, grab chairs and start to scoot them in front of the door. It'll slow that person down. If they're able to get the door open and suddenly there's a mound of chairs in front of them, that's going to give you a lot of time to react, if you see him doing that. So just think about all the different stuff you have available to you to keep that person from coming in the room that you're in. Then the last step. So run, hide, fight. Last step, fight. This we kind of leave up to you guys. And I tell people, if it gets to this point where somebody has broken their way through a door, you don't feel comfortable running, and it comes down to you protecting yourself and protecting your family. Take what you have and use it. I said we have all these chairs sitting here. If you need to grab a chair and you're going to stand there and wait for a person, use the chair to throw it at somebody, to push them against a wall, whatever it is. But use what you have available. You're sitting in an office building at a desk. What do you have sitting right in front of you? You probably have your coffee, you probably have a stapler, a computer, your purse, your bags, that kind of stuff. Use it. If I don't want to get a stapler thrown at my head, if I come through a doorway and people start chucking stuff at me, I'm going to probably go the other direction. So use what you have available. And think about this too, is if you're in that room with other people, if it's coworkers or if it's other people in the congregation, maybe talk to each other and say, hey, if somebody gets through this door, what are we going to do? Are we all just going to sit here? Are we going to run the other way? This is a good time to come up with a little bit of a plan, like, hey, you three guys, if he comes through the door, can you run and tackle him, try to hold him down, cause a distraction, throw something at him, whatever it is. Just come up with a little bit of a plan in your head. That way you're not thinking about it when he's standing in front of you. Come up with it ahead of time. Be ready to go in case that guy makes it through the door, that this is what we're going to do. Also think about where you would actually hide in a room. This is kind of a hard example to use because there's so many different doors, but if you're in a classroom, if you're in your office, in your little room or whatever, just think about where you would hide in a room. So you see in the center of that picture there, imagine that as being your door frame, and then a bad guy going past the door and just looking in. You don't want to be standing against like the back wall. Hide yourself in a corner of that room where he's not going to see you. So any of those two, the top or bottom corners there, you can't actually see if you walk past the door. So don't just hang out in the middle. Hide yourself in a spot that they're not going to see you. If there's a bathroom or a cabinet, something that you can get into or hide behind, like I said, just give the impression that nobody's in that room. And then, like I said before, just use whatever you have. Everybody's probably got car keys on them. Arm yourself with car keys if you need to. Do whatever it is you have to do, because it's your life depending on it at this point. And there aren't any rules. This person's coming in here to do harm to you or your family. It's going to essentially fall on you to protect yourself and your kids, your family, whoever it is. So moving forward a little bit farther, when the police arrive at an incident like this, we just ask a few simple things. So we understand this is the worst day of everyone's life. Yours, ours as well. We don't want to deal with this stuff. We don't want to go to this stuff. And we know that you guys are going through a very traumatic event. So we just ask that people try to be as calm as possible, keep their hands in the air, and just follow the commands that the police give. We are going to slowly escort people out of the building and try to be as calm as possible, but everybody's going to be pretty amped up if something like this does happen. One thing that's hard for people to realize too is that if somebody is hurt on the floor, so if somebody gets shot and they're laying on the floor in pain, they're bleeding out on the floor, and the police show up, we don't have time to deal with that person right away who's injured. It sounds harsh, but we're going to walk right past that person and keep going through the building trying to find the bad guy. Because if he's still out there, it's no good if I stop and try to talk with you if that guy's still hurting other people. So we're going to run in and go and stop the bad guy, and then as soon as possible, we'll come back and start dealing with everybody who's injured. People always ask about concealed carry. We say it's your right. If you want to concealed carry, go ahead. If you use your weapon, that's what it's there for. We just always ask and remind people, if you use your gun, as soon as you're done using it and you feel safe to, set it down, walk away, keep your hands in the air. People don't always think about this, but if they end up using their gun to stop a bad guy, and they're sitting there holding their gun in their hand, and I walk in as a police officer, and I see you standing there with a gun in your hand, I'm going to think that you're the bad guy, most likely. And that's not what anybody wants. So set it down, just walk away. We'll get it figured out as to what happened and all that. But just remember that we're gonna come in as police officers not necessarily knowing who the bad guy is. So if you're holding a weapon, if you're holding that knife that you grabbed out of the butcher block, set it down. You know, the police aren't gonna know who the bad guy is necessarily. So I talked about it before. I said if we see an injured person on the floor and we don't have time to deal with it right now, we're gonna go focus on the bad guy. What a rescue task force is, it's a team of EMS people and police officers. So as soon as it is safe to do so, those EMS and those police officers will come in as a team and start removing people from the scene. So they're not gonna treat people, you know, inside a building. They'll get them out as soon as possible. This can happen in the first like 5 minutes of an active shooter or a shooting. You know, we've trained this here in Ripon, and we've trained it with all of Fond du Lac County, and this is like becoming a nationwide thing. So we don't have time to sit and like we can't let people, you know, be injured on the ground for 30 minutes while we search for the bad guy. We'll start to get EMS people in there. It's just going to take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to get that rolling. So I just use this slide to kind of explain what the newest police procedures are. Okay, so how can we prepare ourselves in a church setting to be, you know, a little bit better prepared? What can we do? We're doing it right now. So familiarizing ourselves with the fact that this could happen. That's probably the biggest step. Most people don't think that this is ever going to happen in small town Ripon. Here in a church, why would anybody want to hurt the people here? Everybody knows each other. You're all good people. But unfortunately, there's a chance that it could happen. And, you know, you guys have taken a step forward here in training yourselves and training the staff on how we can be a little bit more prepared. I give you guys credit because there's a lot of places that have no interest in teaching this stuff. They think that it's too scary, it's not something we should talk about, it's never gonna happen. Well, it could happen, and I commend you guys for you know, starting this conversation at least. I don't know what you guys call it. Is it greeters? Anybody who like is working, I guess, in the morning, like when church is starting, people who are standing near the door. These are kind of the first line of defense people if something like this happens. So getting greeters and all the staff kind of familiarized with what we're gonna do if something like this happens. Probably the biggest thing we can do is minimizing door access. And this is a tough one, I understand. You guys have a lot of doors in this place. This is huge. I have been through at least 3 or 4 different doors in this building at different days for different reasons. Like, it just happens. There's a lot of ways in and out of here, and it's tough for you guys to do because, you know, people have traditionally used whatever door is closest to them, and that's fine, but it might be time to think about minimizing the amount of doors that we have open in a facility at one time. It also opens up the idea of maybe once service has began, maybe think about locking the doors that you have, or that's the time that we minimize door access to just one door. Again, that's kind of a hard concept for a lot of churches because traditionally the doors just remain open the entire service. You want everybody to be able to come in off the street. If you're late, you want those people to be there, but if you're worried about protecting yourselves and your congregation, it might be time to think about, you know, minimizing the access. So maybe just leaving one door open or locking all the doors and then relying on those greeters to let people in. If there's a straggler after, you know, 10 minutes goes past, doors are locked, we have somebody at the door, a greeter can go out there and say, oh yeah, I recognize you, that's Joe, let him in. Or that's kind of the opportunity where if they see somebody who doesn't look familiar and they're knocking on the door trying to get in, to maybe just say, you know, the doors are locked, sorry, you're gonna have to come back a different time if you want to come in or talk with us. Might be time to think about that. It's just an option. Like I said, greeters are kind of the first line of defense. We can also think about doing a quick walkthrough. So once the service begins, maybe just have somebody walk through the building, through the upper level, go down to the basement, make sure there's nobody who got in while the doors were open, and is just kind of like hanging out in the basement, maybe waiting for the doors to be locked, and then that's their chance to come up here and cause problems. It's something we can consider doing. It's an easy thing. It takes 5 minutes. If somebody wants to just walk through, make sure there's nobody in the basement, you know, where they aren't supposed to be. And then maybe posting up a greeter near the main doors, whichever one you do plan on using, so they can be that vantage point for, hey, somebody's showing up late, let's let them in, or no, this person doesn't look good, let's leave them outside. Some of the things the school does in preparation, I guess, is all of their doors have these little like window slivers that are, like this wide and this long. One thing they do is they actually just tape together pieces of paper and they leave them next to the door. That way, if they have to hide in a room, they can just take that piece of paper, slide it over the window, and suddenly bad guy can't see in that window. So if you guys have places downstairs that maybe have those little windows, you could think about just making those little like window shades, temporary window shades, and leaving them next to the back of the door. Nobody's ever gonna notice it, so it doesn't hurt anything to have them there. Another thing you can consider is like investing in just some cheap door wedges. So those little rubber blocks that you see sitting by every single doorway, in most commercial buildings, you could just set one, against the wall next to every door. That way, if you guys do feel like you need to lock the doors to keep somebody out, you can just kick one of those door wedges under the door, and there's no way that person's really going to be able to push that down easily. So it's just a cheap, simple thing that a lot of people don't think about, but a door wedge can really, really stop somebody who's trying to get in a doorway. And then another thing that we can consider is appointing actually like a safety team. You guys know your congregation better than I do. You'll know who is, if there's somebody who's like an EMT, a fire department member, maybe a retired officer or a police officer, somebody who works at the hospital, a nurse, anything like that, or just people who just want to be on kind of the forefront of this. Maybe consider appointing like a team, a core group of people who train in this kind of stuff and continue to talk about it. Like, hey, if something happens, we're kind of the ones who people expect to step up and react in one of these situations. I said earlier, like if you're in a room together with each other, somebody should step up and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Well, those will be the people that they're in church every week. If you have this group of maybe 5 or 10 people who understand and kind of recognize this type of stuff, that they'll step up if something like this happens, that they'll be the ones who actually escort somebody out of a building or are going to be the ones who call the police, whatever it is. And then the last thing we always suggest is having first aid and AED kits available. In talking with Monica, it sounds like you guys have multiple AEDs, which is awesome. There's a lot of places in town that can't afford one, and you guys have multiple, but making sure that everybody knows how to use them as well. It's no good if only 1 or 2 people in the congregation know how to use it, so familiarize yourself with that type of equipment and first aid stuff, and you'll be a lot better prepared. Another thing I suggest too is you can create your own little like first aid bag. Maybe you can keep it in your purse, you can keep it in your car. I have an old backpack in my car that's just got some real simple stuff in it. That way, in case something does happen, it's just got Band-Aids and maybe like some like gauze and stuff like that. This is something simple that you can keep with you or in your car in case something like this happens. All right, so we'll go through a very quick scenario. I know we're running short on time, but we'll go through just kind of a quick scenario with you guys. It's a Sunday morning service. It's 9 a.m. Susan and her family have been members for years. You know that she has recently split up with her husband, and she's now staying at home with the kids. Husband's off, out of the house, not really sure what he's been up to. Well, today, for whatever reason, ex-husband shows up to church, and he sees Susan and the kids sitting over there, and he actually wants to go sit with them. And you guys probably know what's going on. You probably know that they're not together anymore. You see this happening. You see Greg show up. He's trying to get with his family, and it causes a little bit of a scene. So let's just say that Susan says, no, get away from us. We kicked you out of here. We don't want problems in church. Can you just leave? What do you think we should do with that situation, with what we have? For other people, because church is kind of on pause right now. Everybody kind of sees what's going on. We have a little bit of an issue. What do you think we can do with what we have? Sure. Yeah, exactly. Somebody should stand up, because Susan's there with her kids. She's trying to be safe. Greg is clearly, came in just to cause a problem, and she wants him gone. You guys don't want him here. Somebody has to stand up and say, hey, look, you got to leave, man. So, okay. Getting him out of there, that's the best idea. So we'll move forward a little bit. So Greg's walking out. He gets to the doorway over here, and you hear him shout, you're all gonna pay for this, just give me a minute. So knowing that now, what do you think we can do now? Okay. So he's been pushed outside, he's clearly angry, we're gonna call the police, definitely. It's one of those situations where if he gets out of that building, probably time to think about locking the doors, keep somebody near the door to watch this guy, maybe watch him, make sure he gets into his car, see what he's doing, but probably not the time to just immediately resume service and say, all right, he's out of here, we're good to go back to church service. You know, he's made a threat and he said that he's gonna come back in a minute. Like, it's time to just put things on pause, watch what he's doing, lock the doors, you know, maybe get people, say, hey, you know, we want everybody kind of in the back, or we're gonna, you know, just wait in the entranceway, or whatever it is. Just get people away from wherever he is, whatever nearest exit. All right, update. Greg's back. All of a sudden, you guys are all in here, church is resumed, and you hear glass shattering, you hear yelling, you hear what you think is a loud bang. In this situation, you're in church here and you hear that going on, what do you guys think you should do? Exactly. That's exactly it. You kind of have two options in that situation, and that's running out whatever exit you think is best, or hiding where you're at. It's not a great room to hide in because it's so big and so wide open. So getting yourselves out, a secondary exit is probably your best choice. So where are we going once we get out this door? What do you guys think? Exactly. That's up to you guys. We can't tell you where to run to, but if it's through the parking lot, over to Polish construction, whatever it is, get yourself just away from the building. You heard somebody cause damage in the building. You heard possibly a gunshot. You're going to want to get as far away as you can. What are we doing as soon as we feel safe to do it? Maybe once we're in the parking lot. Exactly. Because the police haven't even been notified about what's going on. You know, at that point, get the police going. It's just going to speed up the process. Okay, moving forward. So some things, just review kind of the stuff that we went over. You guys have done it. You've started the first, step of this process, and that's getting people on the same page, realizing that this stuff can happen, and just talking about it. A lot of places don't want to talk about it, but you guys, like I said, I commend you for asking us to come in here and do this, because that's kind of the first step. Now the next step kind of falls on you guys. If you guys want to make changes in the building and how you guys are doing things, that's going to kind of fall on you with whatever you feel comfortable with. I can't tell you what to do. I can just tell you some options and the best ways to probably keep yourself safe, and it just kind of falls on you guys to take action on that and to do something with it. If you guys, a lot of this stuff kind of falls into the business world, but actually doing like a drill or like a tabletop exercise, which is simply just talking your way through one of these situations. If you create a security team of people that, kind of the action team if something happens, meeting with those people once in a while and just refreshing yourselves on this and what your plan is if something happens, and just kind of being comfortable with what you guys think you'll do if you do have somebody who wants to cause harm. And then the three simple things: run, hide, and fight. We try to drill that into people's minds. Just remember, I gotta either run or I gotta hide. And then your last option is fight. So, questions, comments, concerns? This is the time to get them out there. No, I actually looked through that. It was a pretty comprehensive plan. Like I said, a lot further than most places were. So I think you're on a good track with that. That was mine. It's okay. Sure. No, it seems appropriate for everything. Is there anything that you guys would like to see maybe differently with church? Do you guys think that maybe locking doors, or do you think that's a bad idea? Sure.
That aren't linked. So we have an odd space because of the age, the time, the add-on, the remodel. Because you can come in that half of the building into this half of the building, sort of, without maybe downstairs, whatever. So part of the problem is this space was not, and the security of this space was meant for easy access.
Yep, I understand. I understand. Yeah, and that's something you guys can think about if it's limiting to 2 doors or whatever it is. It's tough. You guys have a strange building here. She walked me through it, and I was lost, honestly, down in the basement. I had no clue where I was.
And the number of people who struggle to access are limited to that. That's their way they have to go. Otherwise, you're dealing with serious stairs in the other direction.
That's true.
So the logistics of the building, for some reason, 150 years ago, they weren't thinking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's understandable.
So part of it is thinking how we go in another direction.
Just to reiterate how serious this is, I work at a factory that's 250,000 square feet. We have over 200 employees. Every week, I'm training new hires on this, and every week we train all of our staff on run, hide, and fight every single year.
Yeah, and that's the way that a lot of people are getting the training is through HR at work or this type of stuff, because otherwise it's just not out there, or it was never taught to you before. We do have, what factory do you work for? Where do you work? Okay, so that's great that you guys are training that, because some places don't train it at all. I had Alliance Laundry approach me. They essentially didn't have a training program in place at all for this type of thing. And they're working on getting that set up, but it takes a long time in such a big facility like that to get that idea out there. But it's good that everybody's starting to at least get on the same page.
Does the college have some sort of plan? Because that's so spread out in so many buildings.
They do, and a college campus is really a tough place because some buildings have open doors, some of them are locked. Some are classrooms, some are dormitories. They have a plan in place, but it's pretty generic. And they can't tell it, the hard thing is too, you can't tell people what to do. You can't say to your students or to your employees, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna run to the track, or you're gonna run to the Wilmore Center, whatever it is. You can just give suggestions, or, you can't say how people should respond. You just kinda have to give generalizations. So it's hard to create a plan that works perfectly for the college or for the high school, because every one of these situations is different too.
What's your feeling on security cameras too? Do you think that can help, prevent?
It's always it helps dissuade some people from maybe doing these events, but I think most people nowadays kind of understand that there's going to be cameras everywhere. It definitely doesn't hurt. We always encourage people to have cameras no matter what, whether that's at home or in a place of business or worship, but this is a tough facility to do that on, because how many different cameras are you going to need? It's going to be a very expensive process of getting all that. So again, it kind of comes down to money most of the time. If you guys have the money to do it, it's always a good idea, but cameras won't do anything while it's happening. It's kind of a after the fact thing. So it kind of comes up down to you guys if that's something you think that you should pay for or not. Anything else? Well, I appreciate your time, your questions, comments. It was great. We love that you guys want this stuff. And if you guys have any other places that you think would benefit from one of these conversations, give the police department a call. We can set it up. All right. Thank you, guys.